In this video, I'll be making a sword with my 3D pen. I'll be using this metal rod to make it, and this thinner brass rod for the guard. This is a gift for a little kid. When he comes over, he always asks me to make him something, and I finally gave in. And just like any reasonable adult, the first thing I decide to make him is a sword. I'll be using wood filament for this. It's easier to work with, and it's the only filament that I have right now. I found this sword while browsing for designs. I had purple fairy lights lying around, so I wanted to pick a purple sword. And since it was made for Roblox, I can title the video after that and get some clicks. Once the frame was done, I added the metal rod and attached it to the frame with some filament so it wouldn't move. Next was filling the blade in, and I had to do this in layers if I wanted the blade to be strong. If your hand could have muscles on it, my hand would be ripped. I wanted to add the brass rod. I attempted to bend it into shape and I failed miserably, so I just cut it and put it in place. I attached it the same way I did the metal rod. I built the filaments on the part that went down the slant and filled it in. And this makes it easier to get the look I'm going for. I really can't explain it, but you'll see when I do it. Instead of filling it in completely with circles, I decided to fill it in with lines, and once I finished one row, I went back in the other direction. I did this over and over until it was completely filled up to the top of the rod. Back to the previous point I mentioned, you can see how easy it is to give it that slant shape now that I'm doing it. Since the blade was secured, I went the easy way and less manic inducing filling way, which is basically making lines from the top to the bottom and then filling it in. I outlined the middle part and filled that in as well. After a couple hours, it started to look like a sword, but next step was the guard. I made the 4 pieces that made up the guard and put them together. And they didn't fit? I wonder what that means. That was my first clue that something went wrong, but I just filled it in and kept on going. I'll pay for it later. That was in place, it was time for the lights. I decided to put the battery pack here because there was no other place for it to go. As for the purple LEDs, they got held in place with some transparent filament. I remembered to check the LEDs before sealing everything in place because I've totally never forgotten and had to completely start over before. Look at how many layers this took, and remember how much time it takes me to make one layer. It's really cool to see when it's done, but it's not cool to make it. Once it was time to smooth, I used a Clover mini iron because it's hot and it's large. Being able to smooth out really large projects with a really large hot tool really helps out. The tip is even perfectly sized for this corner. Once I was done, I had this. Now you can clearly see the difference the battery pack made. But before I fix this, I had to refill with Diet Coke. I'll be using a Dremel to clean everything up and sand down both guards to the same size. This is when I realized the template wasn't correct and the blade was off. To fix this, I used a sword and a marker to mark the blade equal length on both sides, the front and the back, so when I was done, everything would look the same. I used a soldering iron to remove the filament. As you can see by all the different color markers, it took me a few tries. Then I brought my Dremel out one last time and sanded it down again. It looked pretty smooth, but the Dremel left some fuzzy bits, so to fix this, I technically set the sword on fire. I used the torch to melt away all the stuff I didn't want on it. Now onto the handle I completely forgot about. It's easy to make, it's just 2 rings and a cone. I removed the leftover metal rod, smoothed it out, and burnt it just like the rest of the sword. I gave everything a coat of spackling paste and then sanded it off. I gave it a coat of gray primer. And I'll be using this metallic paint to, wait a minute, the paint wasn't mixed very well, so I had to shake it up myself. It ended up being a nice color, but I added black because it was taking too many layers. I added some paint thinner to the paint, which is something that you're supposed to use, but I didn't know. This basically keeps your paint from getting clumpy on whatever you're painting. Once it was mixed, I started painting. And then I added a darker metallic silver to the sides for some shading. And then painted the cracks purple, which was also metallic. The handle was just brown, not metallic brown. And then I added a darker brown on top of it to give it a wood look. While that was drying, I mixed some black paint and water to make a black wash, and this would basically make it look old and used. After that, I went back to the handle and used a lighter brown to make it look worn. I used a couple different shades of brown, and I'm really happy with how it turned out. Next up was the lettering on the sword, and I used a brown marker to spell it out. I used my soldering iron with the really pointy tip to carve the words out. This is how it looks with the lights out. The paint wasn't thick enough to block out all the light, so you can still see it even when it's not on the letters. While attempting to fix the letters, I realized heating up the paint gave it a bubble texture, so I did this for the whole blade. Attempting was the right word because I completely ruined the letters by trying to fix them. I should have just kept it that way, but you know. But if I hold it far back, it looks nice, right? Right? I also fixed the paint. Here's a cut test that I made using a very hard banana. Here's how the sword turned out though, and I'm really happy about it. Thanks for watching.